as the name suggests, animal communication is communicating with animals. It's as simple as that. Telepathy means distance communication with the help of feelings and senses. So, tele means distance. Pathy comes from a word called pathos, which means feelings and emotions. I've had people tell me, उसको बोलो उस टपरी पे आने को, I will come and collect him, things like that, as if this is some GPS location. If it was so easy for the animal to come to your tapri, but it would have just come, the animal would have just come home. So when you do a cobra pose, what are you trying to integrate? It's not only about our spine and getting into that pose and feeling a certain way. It's actually being that animal is such a wonderful thing, and then to be able to see the world from their perspective, from their eyes, is a completely life-changing experience. The leopard told her that I'm worried about the two cubs that were with me, and after that exchange, the leopard's personality and reception towards the human and caregivers completely changed, because he felt heard, he felt understood. Most times they are willing to oblige, and then there are times when they may say, no, we can't do it, because we can't force them to do anything. But at least there is this understanding that, yes, they understand my request, and when possible, they oblige, and when not, they are at least honest with what they have to say.
Hello and welcome to the YwR podcast, and today we have something very, very interesting that we're going to cover. Now, a lot of times you see my dog Roo in the frame, and I was very intrigued when I learnt about animal communication. There are people who can actually talk and communicate with plants and animals, and this is actually taught. So I wanted to know more about it, and I hope you're interested to know more about it, because it has a lot to do about your intuition. It has a lot about how you care for your animals and for the environment around us. So today I have with me a very special guest, Akshaya Kawle, who is an animal communicator. She trains people on how to communicate with animals and plants, and she does a lot more. So let's find out more. Welcome, Akshaya.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let's talk about what is animal communication before we start anything else.
So, as the name suggests, animal communication is communicating with animals. It's as simple as that. And we believe that we are all forms of the same energy, so we are energetically connected. And since we have that connection, we don't differentiate between the physical form the energy has. We believe that everything has consciousness, and through that consciousness, we are able to convey messages and transfer information with other species around us. I mean, we have to be really stupid to believe we are the only ones who can communicate, right?
Yeah.
And have feelings and have thoughts. So through the power of intuition, through the power of telepathy, we are able to communicate with other species, not limiting ourselves to just animals or companion animals, but all the species around us. And I'm sure every person who has any kind of connection with nature, be it having plants, be it having animals at home or otherwise, have had these experiences, right? Where you know what your animal wants to share, when you know what your plant needs, when you need to move it to another place where there's more sunlight, or when it needs more water. But as humans, and as adult humans, as urban humans, we do tend to dismiss this communication as experience, gut feeling, or more so coincidence, because we don't want to acknowledge something which does not fit into our logical framework and what we've been taught. Since it does not have a lot of objectivity, we as adults may dismiss it as communication, but it's as simple as that. It's just communicating, exchanging information through feelings and emotions, and everybody is capable of it.
Suppose I come to you and I say that my dog is having such and such issue.
Yeah.
How do you communicate exactly? Do you have to have the pet in front of you? Is it a long distance kind of communication? Do you need a photo? How does it work?
So since we work on the basis of telepathy. Telepathy means distance communication with the help of feelings and senses. So tele means distance. Pathy comes from a word called pathos, which means feelings and emotions. And these are universal. So the way a plant understands happiness is the same way a human, an ant, an elephant would understand happiness. We may express it differently. We may choose different words to explain what that emotion is, but the feeling inherently remains the same. And that is what we work with. So when a human comes to me with a request for communication, I don't need to have that animal right in front of me because I'm working with telepathy, which is distant communication. So, what we do is we connect to that energy by tuning into their energetic frequency simply with the power of intention. So, for example, as you and I speak, you're not doing anything before you ask me a question, right? It's just a simple intention that you said that you wish to ask me this question, and then you verbalize that question. Let's say, similarly, when we are speaking to animals, we simply set an intention which animal we wish to speak to. So, if you say you want me to talk to your dog, the intention is as simple as that: I wish to speak to Rashmi's dog. Or I can refer to the dog by the name, or however I know the dog exists or that energy exists. And then just start talking as we have started talking, and they would respond. And since animals are not interested in a lot of gossip, we can be rest assured that no other Ashmi's Ruru is going to intervene in the conversation, because your Ruru knows this is intended towards him or her.
How did you get into animal communication?
I didn't get into it actually thinking I wanted to make it a profession. I simply took a break after I got married. I took a year-long sabbatical. I come from the training and development background. I have 13 years of experience with corporate training. I was training middle and high level management on communication skills, non-verbal communication. So to say, I've just expanded my work now from humans to animals and other elements of nature. So I took a year-long sabbatical after I got married, and I was always interested in the intuitive sciences and arts. So I was just watching a YouTube video, and I came across this beautiful video by a senior communicator by the name of Anna Breitenbach. In that video, she was called upon to speak to a leopard, a black leopard, who was rescued from, I believe, a circus. And the leopard was not responding to the people at the conservation site, at the sanctuary, in a very positive way. He seemed upset. He was very, very averted to any kind of human companionship. And when she went there, she had this beautiful conversation with him, wherein the leopard told her that I'm worried about the two cubs that were with me. And after that exchange, the leopard's personality and reception towards the human and caregivers completely changed, because he felt heard, he felt understood. And I had animals back then, companion animals back then as well, who were 8, 9 years of age, so they were aging, right? And I was like, oh my god, that'd be so cool, no, to know what my dogs want. They're aging, and I want to be able to give them what they would like me to do for them. And that's how I intuitively started researching and talking to my animals. At that point, I didn't have dogs at home with me because I was already married, so it got a little easier to talk to my dogs at my mom's house, because animal communication is very intangible. There's always this confusion of whether it's my thought or whether it's coming from the animal. So when I started speaking to my dogs, I could get feedback from my mother. So I'd ask her if they're sitting here, they ate this today, or this one is not feeling too well today, has stomach upset. And that brought about a lot of confidence. I had absolutely no intention of doing it with anybody else. It was solely for the purpose of working with my own animals. I used to then, at that point, also work with an NGO. I used to foster a lot for them. So I had a lot of abused, rescued animals who would come to my home. I started using it with them because, there was this one case I remember very well. This was a Lhasa Apso who was found at Hirannani Meadows, was very scared, abandoned, and was very scared of the dogs, and went and jumped into a well or something, and she was rescued with a rope around, etc. And she was brought into my home. And she refused to eat. She just went and hid under a couch. She refused to eat. I had to give her medication. She refused to take that. And I was also a little scared because she was scared. So in that state, you don't know how the animals would respond.
Yeah.
And that time I thought, oh, well, let me just try this with this animal and see if there's anything I can do. And I spoke to her and she said, just let me be. I just want to be. Stay away. I don't want to interact with any one of you. And I said, but we are here to help. And, you need to be medicated and you need to have food. And she said, please let me be. And I'll come to you when I want that help, but let me be. Let me feel safe. And for about 36 hours, I just let her be. I didn't care if she ate, she drank. I didn't care about anything else because there was no point of intruding into that space with her. And after about 36 hours, she came to me like she knew me forever. She after that she allowed me to put medicines in her mouth, and she slept with me on the bed, to a point that when the rescuers and the NGO people came to pick her up for a prospective adoption, they didn't recognize her. They said, "Oh my God, is this the same dog?" And it wasn't the physical appearance that changed, but just her general demeanor and personality had changed. And that, I believe, was like a turning point for me, because as humans, and we come from a good place, but we do often work from this savior syndrome, because we feel that we know the best.
Yeah.
I know the animal need this, and I know this is the best for the animal, and I know it's from a good place because I've done it with my own animals. I still continue to do it a lot of times. But giving them the opportunity to express themselves and listen to them, we may or may not agree. If my animal one day tells me I don't want treatment and I don't want to be vaccinated, of course it's not going to be something I'm going to be on board with. But just giving them an opportunity to express themselves and be heard is such a wonderful thing. And then to be able to see the world from their perspective, from their eyes, is a completely life changing experience. So that's when I decided, okay, I'll do this more consciously. So because I really started animal communication to help my animals, but in the long run, I've realized that they have helped me become a better person, understand the world from a very different perspective.
So when you say I spoke to the dog, now usually if you're talking to your pet,
Yeah.
you say, "Hey, what do come? Do you want to eat something? Do you want to go?" These are the kind of questions that you ask, because when you talk out loud, you're not expecting a response back from the
Yes.
dog. So how do you communicate with the animal? Do you sit and do you close your eyes and do you have to do something like that, or how do you communicate?
So every communicator will have their own personal practice. There is no one size fits all. And for me, I like to keep it as casual as possible, because I'm not someone who can rigidly follow rules. So for me, it's like having a conversation with any other human. With my own animals, I would generally verbalize and speak with them. But when I'm typically doing a consultation, it'll be more of a mental conversation. And so with animal communication, we transfer information through our senses. So our senses become the media to that communication. So irrespective of what language you use, that becomes insignificant, because spoken language is a human construct. It doesn't exist in nature otherwise. So when we speak, we generally transfer information through our senses. So the way you would receive information would be in the form of a visual, a thought, a feeling, a sound, maybe sometimes smell and taste. And then you have to be aware of what you're receiving through these senses to collect that information. When I'm consulting or having a consultation, I do it mentally, and I usually receive it in the form of thoughts. So just a day before yesterday, I spoke to a 3-year-old Chow Chow who had suddenly reduced eating. Like he had not stopped really, but something was off with his appetite. And when I connected with him, he did tell me that it's the weather change, it's extremely hot. And then he said, or rather I felt that there was some sensitivity to sound. It was something around my ears, like I felt it. It was not a sentence that came to me, or it was not a typical dialogue as we would look at it, but I just felt like something is very unnerving about the sound sensitivity. And she was due to bring him to the doctor, because we never interfere in the we never other trespass into the other professionals' territory. So she was due to bring him to a vet, and the vet said he has a very severe ear infection. And that is what is causing him physical discomfort, and that is why that sound sensitivity that I received in the form of that feeling. So communication can be like a dialogue where you and I are sitting and talking, or it can be scattered, and with practice you understand how to align it and make it more cohesive for us to understand. But that comes with a little bit of practice.
So if you're walking on the road, you can hear what dogs
No,
are
absolutely not. No, because it's intentional, right?
Yeah.
If I want to, I can. But I don't want to go crazy.
So animal communication doesn't involve only talking to animals. You also
Yes.
talk to plants,
Yes.
right? Now I remember that we have a mango tree outside our house, and the tree did not give mangoes one summer. So my mom started talking to the mango
Talking,
tree.
yeah.
She kept every morning she would go. She said, "Hello, mango tree. How are you, mango tree? I love you, mango tree. Thank you, mango tree." Everyone thought my mom had gone cuckoo.
Sure.
The next year we had a crazy amount of
Harvest,
mangoes. We
yeah.
had more than I think 400 or 500
Wow.
mangoes that came from the tree. So it was like bounty. So is communication with plants one-sided, or for someone like you, Because I feel like you can probably talk back or
Yeah.
feel the communication from the plants, but not everybody can. So do plants also
Yes,
communicate?
and I think everybody can, provided they're open to receiving those messages. Like, for example, if you actually sit down with your mother and ask her that when you spoke to the tree, mango tree, what did you feel? What did you feel the tree was responding? I can guarantee you she'll tell you what the tree was telling her about that exchange. She may or may not consciously accept it as a communication, but I am sure, I can guarantee you that she'll tell you what the tree wanted to tell her. So it's really not a gift. This is one of the biggest myths people have, that this is a gift and you have to be special to have this. Everybody is doing it. There is absolutely no human here who is not able to do it. It's about how open we are to accept something which is not very objective and tangible in nature, because we don't see the tangibility to it, and that becomes very difficult for our conscious mind to accept that this can happen. And this is limited. In fact, I feel the obstruction is also limited to us urban humans. We go little away from like city centers, even 100 kilometers. You'll see rurals and indigenous living in their vortex, no, living in the grounded and rooted. They're talking to their crops, they're talking to their animals. There's no concept of pets there. Everybody is a community animal. The cows can walk in, have some grass, the dogs can come in, they give them some food, and they speak to them, and they don't isolate it as a concept of animal communication. So this is an innate ability, and yes, I have worked on it to become a little more in tune and reduce my inhibitions, because even I had a lot of it. But it's not something that only I am able to do or I am capable of doing. So with plants, be it with animals, be it with mosquitoes, with insects, with fish, it does not matter what physical form the energy has. What really matters is the fact that it's energy, and they are able to communicate. So with plants also, there are so many times people reach out to me to have communications with trees or their gardens or a plant, and they share very specific messages of what they would like their human to do for them. Very specific things. Like, I remember once I spoke to a plant, and I don't have a green thumb, okay, so all plants look the same to me. Like, there are green leaves, and that's it. So I'm not very well versed with what a plant would need. And this plant said, I feel like I have potassium deficiency. And as a communicator, again, when I'm to be careful of what I'm conveying and relaying, right? Because I don't want to, again, medically diagnose the animal or even the plant for that matter. So I told the human that the plant is saying this, but let me check what it means online, because potassium, I don't know, it can be harmful even. And while I was in a conversation with the human, I told her this. And it seems that plant really does need potassium, and the lack of potassium can lead to the withering away of the plant, as was the case in this communication. So, and furthermore, the plant said that my human also has this deficiency, and that is leading to her lower back pain, and she struggles with it, and especially when stress levels are higher, it escalates for her. So while she needs to take care of it from a physical perspective in the form of medicine and healthcare, traditional healthcare, it also needs to be looked upon from the perspective of holistic healing and energy healing and emotional well-being. And I didn't know this about the human. She said that's true. I mean, I do have a lot of backache, and it is a physical issue, but it also escalates because of my emotional state. So it's not limited to what they're able to share. It also extends to how they help us in the process of we helping them.
So the plant told you that the human has a backache.
Yes.
I can imagine a skeptic totally being like, wow, she's
yeah.
just fibbing. How is this even possible? The most unusual animal that you may have communicated with.
I've communicated with snakes, bats, all insects that I see in my property at Burdi.
What do they have to say?
For me, most times with these insects, it's a very need-based communication. So if I see like a reptile at home, or I'm very creeped out with crawlies. I can speak to them, but physically I can't be in the same space. So if I see like a big bug or a crawly around, I will request them to stay where they are as I cross there, because I don't want to freak them out and myself. But these conversations are, like I said, very need-based. So if I request something, most times they are willing to oblige, And then there are times when they may say, no, we can't do it, because we can't force them to do anything. But at least there is this understanding that, yes, they understand my request, and when possible, they oblige, and when not, they are at least honest with what they have to say. Sometimes conversations also revolve around, say, me killing a mosquito, or unintentionally taking someone's life, because I'm not always that aware, right? And since it's a huge property, it can happen. And their understanding of that, their understanding of the prey and predator relationship being an integral part of nature, how survival of the fittest and balance of energy are rules that they live by, and how they may not necessarily hold it against us or curse us or have a grudge against us if it is unintentional and not malicious. So it depends really of what you want to speak to them about and where that conversation leads. Like I remember a couple of months ago, at about 2:33 in the night, I heard a lot of loud screeching sounds, okay? And I honestly thought they were langurs, because a couple of days prior I had seen a couple of langurs in the property opposite to mine. So, but I didn't know what it was. So the intent here was to connect to the source of the sound, because I don't know the physical form. And I realized these are fruit bats, they are not the langurs. So I requested them very politely, could you reduce your volume or move away, because this is my sleeping time? And they also very politely apologized that, oh, we are really sorry, but we can't move away or reduce our volume, because this is how we find food. And this is our eating time. So sorry that we are disturbing your sleep, but this is our eating time. So survival of the fittest. They are not going to care more about my sleep and give up on their food. Yeah. However, after a couple of days, that screeching sound from 2:33 moved to 9:30, 10 at night. And then when I connected with them and I thanked them for it, they were very kind about it. And then after a few days, it completely stopped. So I connected with them again and I told them, you can stay, that's not a problem. Like, did you move away because of the conversation, if you got offended with it? And they said, no, don't worry about it. We were anyway transitioning from one place to the other, so your space was more like a pit stop. And which is true, I've been there since 2019. I've never heard bats. It was a very sudden interaction that I had. So I was also very surprised to know that there are actual bats in my property, which had not been the case for 5 years. So these are the kind of conversations you can have with all species, really.
So are animals, in your experience, are they a lot more intuitive than humans are?
Depends on what you mean by intuitive, right? Because when we speak of intuition, we are all using it on day-to-day basis. Our decision making, our behavior is all a part of our intuition as well, right? Our risk management and how we decide on things. So when it comes to survival, intuition becomes an integral part of that survival. And how you push for your survival is also equally important. So while I will not say that they are more intuitive, I would agree that they are more grounded. So when they are in the moment, they will do only that. They are not thinking about what I ate last night or what I'm about to eat next. So when they're eating, they're eating. Even when they're using the washroom, they're just peeing or pooing. They're not doing anything else. That makes them more aware of themselves and their environment. So very simple things. We often keep saying that our animals understand death. They understand when their human is unwell or who's about to pass away. And why is that? It's not a special skill that the animals have. We understand it, right? Our body releases certain chemicals when we are feeling a certain way. The way we smell changes. Even when we are on our periods, we smell different. So it's not a magic or a voodoo trick that they do. But because they are aware in that moment, they are able to pick up on that shift of energy more than us. If we were that aware and grounded at all times, even we would be able to do it. But we are not, unfortunately. We have so many other things in our mind that we miss out on these very obvious signs around us. So while I don't think they are necessarily more intuitive, I think they use that skill more consciously than we do as humans, as urban humans.
Do people ask you to predict the future with their animals?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes, yes, yes.
And do animals predict the future?
No, they can't predict the future. Nobody can, because future honestly is just an illusion, right? Like, what is future? By the time it happens, it's present.
Yeah.
So there's no concept of future. Animals can, however, give you a calculated estimation, judgment of what can happen, say, in the near future or the future, depending on what has happened in the past or the present. So,
for example,
if I have an exam 6 months down the line and throughout my life, my track record is that I have studied well for it. And if I ask my animal, oh, will I pass with certain marks? The animal would say yes, because that's my track record. I'm continuing to study. And then after the animal says yes, I stop studying, I can fail, right? Because I'm not continuing on the path that I have. So they will make a valuable judgment depending upon our past and present, depending upon what choices we have made and what decisions we have made. So in most cases, what they share does turn out to be the case, because we also continue on the same path and then we say that, oh, they have predicted the future, but that's not really the case. We can change the final outcome depending on the decisions that we make. Also, I don't think it would be right for us to ask them for predictions. So when people do ask me to ask their animals this, I politely decline, because I don't think that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you create better relationships with your animals. Ask questions that would help with that. So if you ask for guidance, that I'm on in a place where I cannot decide whether I want to do this or that, ask for guidance and they're more than happy to give us guidance. But they can't decide for us. Nature will never interfere in free will. So they might tell you, okay, if you do A, this will happen. If you do B, this will happen. And then the choice is yours. But that's to the extent of which we should be getting them involved. We can't use them as astrologers and decision makers, because that is very easy to say, oh, I did this because of you. I didn't want to do it. You recommended it.
Yeah.
So that's to the extent of which this should be used, really.
Okay. Have you ever communicated with an animal in the wild?
Yes, so many times. So every time I go for a wildlife safari, or rather every animal I speak to who's not a companion animal technically is a wild animal. So the crows that come to my window or the lizards that enter my home are all wild animals, right? And they have a very different perception of life, but communication per se is not different. That remains the same. What our companion animals will experience and speak about would be more centered around our human lives, versus what these animals, free animals, speak about has a lot of other elements involved in it. So that is a fundamental difference between the conversation as such, like the things that they would share. But other than that, there is absolutely no difference. In fact, most of my students, when they do the course and they want to visit a wildlife, they would talk to the landscape, they'll talk to the animal they want to see, and they'll do land up seeing those animals because they don't mind obliging to that request. So a lot
So
of,
you're saying that if they go for a safari and they want to see a lion, they communicate with the lion.
Yeah. They request, it's not an order. And most times, as I said, they pick up on our intention. If you're doing it to show off, oh, see, now I'm going to call a lion and the lion will come,
Then
that's
it's
not
not
going to
gonna
happen.
happen.
But if it's a genuine request saying, I'm coming and I would love to see you and I'd really be grateful, they will show up for sure.
Tell me some of the most common misconceptions that people have about animal communication.
So one, we discussed that it's an innate ability, that it's not an innate ability.
Yeah, people think that you need to have some
you need to be
superpower.
gifted, and so that's not true at all. Everybody can do it. It's only about how open we are to accepting it. So some people live their lives very unabashedly and they are like, this can be done, and they do it. And some people, if they come from a very structured, logical bent of mind, then they may find it a little difficult to accept the answers from the animals, but if they are open to it, they will be able to do it. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions. The second thing is that a lot of people feel like it's like waving a magic wand, like my dog is doing this, my cat is doing this, make them stop doing it. Doesn't work like that. It's a conversation. And it has its own limitations, to the extent of which the animal is willing to talk to us or willing to bring a change, and more so the ability of the animal to do that as well, right? I give this example so many times that as humans, there are so many things we know are not good for us, and yet we may not be able to give them up completely. For someone who smokes, for that matter, or for someone who drinks regularly, as adult individuals, most of us, we can safely assume, know that it's not good for our health.
Yeah.
And yet, would we be able to quit overnight? Not everyone can go cold turkey and quit, right? So if there are certain habits the animal has developed, and you're seeking for a change, it's important that we give them that time to change. So that's another misconception, that, oh, if you talk to an animal and if a tiger comes in front of you, will the tiger not eat? I think that is like the most absurd thing I've heard. Uh, but if unfortunately that is the case, and if the tiger is hungry, I would believe the tiger would eat me, even if the tiger hears me and hears my request. If the tiger is dying of hunger, I think the tiger would prioritize his own survival over mine. So that is like, people have these weird ideas, about how it works. Likewise, I think one of the biggest misconception people have is finding lost animals with animal communication. Again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of free will and consent, and the ability of animals to share. So certain cases animals may have left on their own and they may not want to share their location details, and this does not go to say that the human should stop looking. I'm only saying, from the context of communication, communication may not be very helpful in this regard. So even if the animal is saying, I don't wish to return, I won't tell the human, don't look for the animal. I'll say, keep looking. However, communication is not going to be very helpful in this case. Certain times when the animal is genuinely lost, like the definition of lost is, I don't know where I am. So then expecting the animals to give you location details. I've had people tell me, उसको बोलो उस टपरी पे आने को, I will come and collect him. Things like that, as if this is some GPS location. If it was so easy for the animal to come to your tapri, but it would have just come, the animal would have just come home. So these things, they don't understand the nuances of communication, as well as how it works and to the extent of which it works. Things that we wouldn't do just by being told, other things that animals also wouldn't do just by the virtue of being told. Another misconception is that you have to be very saint like to communicate, that you have to meditate for hours and hours and you have to follow a very sattvic lifestyle. That's not true either. You should follow a sattvic lifestyle, no doubt about that, but that's not necessarily a prerequisite to animal communication. Anyone can begin, and of course there is scope of getting better. But just because you don't meditate or can't meditate, it is just in the stereotypical sense where you do anulom vilom and you do your kapalbhati, etc., doesn't mean you cannot communicate. Meditation helps with everything, and we all hope we would find the time to develop that as a practice, but that's definitely not something that should keep you from communicating. You can communicate even if you're not practicing meditation in the stereotypical term. So these are a few common misconceptions that I hear from other humans about animal communication.
So you talking about meditation brings me to, do you practice anything on a regular basis to hone your skills of
absolutely.
communication or your intuitive powers?
Yes. So one of my go-to techniques is focusing on my breath work. Breath work really helps me, and I did rather struggle with anxiety. So that has helped me cope with that. So even before animal communication, focusing on my breath work was just something that worked for me to calm me down, and I still continue that. So that is on a regular basis, like even before you came in, if I'm just sitting here, I would just focus on my breath work to help me relax and calm down. Apart from that, I focus a lot on grounding. So walking bare feet on Mother Nature, not tiles and not tar and cement, but actual soil or sand. And because I have the luxury of doing that, since I don't live in the city, that's something that I really practice as a mindfulness activity and a grounding activity. I do a yoga practice twice a week now. I've started again, so that helps me relax and calm down. But other than that, just taking few moments out of the routine to be more mindful and in the moment, that really helps. So it could be just as simple as going and having a shower, because when I'm in the shower, I'm not thinking about anything else. Water is so cleansing. All my senses are involved in the activity of having that shower. That helps me. But it has to be intentional. So for those who want to even practice communication and are struggling to find their own grounding activity, I always tell them, find anything positive in your life, any activity which is positive. And then each time you do that activity, just be intentional about it, that this is my grounding activity. It could be as simple as spending your time with your plants or your animals. Because when we are spending time with them, we're not thinking about what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow. We are in the moment enjoying that time with them. So, absolutely any activity, it could be a morning cup of chai, it could be reading your newspaper, it could be listening to music, singing, any form of body movement, exercise, dance, any kind of art, and of course anything that involves your senses. So as simple as cooking, a lot of people find cooking very therapeutic
Yeah.
because all the senses are involved. For me it's extremely stressful. I would rather do the cleaning part, right? So every individual will have a very different way of grounding themselves, and we need to find our way because one size doesn't fit all. So for me, whatever it is that I enjoy, I will turn it into my grounding activity, because the kind of work that I do, no matter how hard I try to be a hollow bone and work from a neutral space, at the end of the day, I'm a human. I can't discount that. And it does impact, right? Day in and day out, I'm talking to animals who are dying, who are sick, who are missing, who have health issues, behavioral issues. And you do tend to reach a threshold after
Yeah.
a point. So, that regular emptying yourself of these feelings and emotions is extremely important to make this work sustainable. Otherwise, you'll do it for 6 months and you'll not want to even speak to your own animals after that, after seeing what happens around and what the kind of experiences animals go through. And more so because I work with companion animals. I don't work with wild animals. That is more of what I do in my personal life. But consultations are back to back, like talking to companion animals. It does tend to get to you after a point if you don't practice regular cleansing your own energy. So these are my ways of grounding.
Okay. Is there any training that you have to do as an animal communicator?
So legally, there is no backing for my profession, right? So nobody can certify me saying, okay, you are now government certified communicator. It is
Yeah.
just like tarot card reading, Reiki healing.
Yeah.
There is no government backing or recognition for it.
Yeah.
So then it all boils down to your own practice. Now, doing courses or learning in a structured manner through a course does help because you have someone to pick their brains, you have a teacher.
Yeah.
And because it is so intangible, it gets difficult for a lot of us to pick it up on our own because there are so many questions and there are barely any answers. It's only when you hear a third person talk about it do you really understand how it works. So personally, if you ask me, I like to learn from other teachers because A, they bring their experience on the table, and it just kind of expands my horizon of looking at that skill. And even today, I've been doing this professionally for 7 years. Right now also, I'm enrolled in a course with another senior communicator because every communicator will bring something very different to the table. While I won't say that it's mandatory because it's there in nature. Like we are teaching what nature can teach you directly. We are middlemen, to be very honest.
Yeah.
But having that tangible element of a teacher is really helpful. What we do as a communicator comes with great responsibility. A small mistake from my end could in certain situation even cost the life of the animal. If someone is asking me whether I should euthanize my dog or not, or my cat or not, because the doctors have said I'm very confused, please talk to my animal and tell me what my animal wants. If I am wrong there, it can have very severe repercussions on the animal.
But has somebody asked you these kind of questions?
Yes, all the time. This is
And
the
then
most common question people come to
Do
me
animals
asking.
say that they want to?
There
be
are
put to sleep?
animals who need help to be to transition because they're just incapable of doing it on their own and they're suffering at a physical level. There are equal number of animals who consider the suffering to be a part of their purpose here, and they say no, I want to go naturally. So there's no one size fits all. I have lost about 5 animals since 2019. Each of them had a very different death. One of them wanted to be euthanized, and she was very upfront about it. Of course, we didn't go and straight up euthanize her. We did consult our doctor, and fortunately for me, my vets know what I do and they are very open to it also. So there was no like discomfort telling my vet, that this is the case. And they said she won't even survive tonight. So if she does, it would be more humane to euthanize her, because otherwise, if she continues to live, because her condition was so bad that she'll start having seizures, she'll start bleeding to her eyes and nose, and if she lives, it's going to be really bad. And she knew it. She said, I remember very explicitly, Rashmi, she told me, I have lived my life with dignity. Please let me go in dignity. Don't make me wait to a point where I am not independent and I can't recognize myself. And at such times, there is so much pressure because my family relies on me. And there is this imposter syndrome that just suddenly comes up, like, what if I'm wrong? But you know you're doing the right thing because you're doing it for your animal. And she was the only one. Last year, the dog that I lost, she was also 14 and a half years old. She had a tumor on her spleen. And the doctor said, if it bursts, then it's going to be horrible. She's going to be in agonizing pain. You'll have to euthanize her immediately. So when I had this conversation with her, she said, I have complete control over my body. I don't want to be euthanized. I will pass away before the tumor bursts. And she passed away in her spleen before the tumor burst. She didn't allow for it. She went in peace without any issues. She wanted to go naturally. But the other one didn't. These are very sensitive topics.
Yeah.
And when you take on that responsibility, you have to be very careful. And that needs practice. It doesn't come with a 1 month, 6 month, a year course.
Yeah.
It needs practice outside. So it's a great profession to be in, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. So you have to be very mindful of what you're getting into and how you're doing it as well.
So when you tell people that you're an animal communicator, have you dealt with anyone who's very skeptical about it? Or
Yeah, so
how do you
many
deal
times.
with such people?
So most times I don't tell people only that I'm an animal communicator. I feel like this is a very personal thing, for me. It's very spiritual. This is my spirituality, and it need not be discussed with everyone. So when people ask me what I do, I say I'm a communication consultant. And then if they show keen interest and I feel comfortable sharing this spirituality with them, then I discuss it with them. Otherwise, we can leave it at me being a communication consultant, because I'm not lying. I am. I do that, right? So early on, there have been times, when I've said I'm a communicator and people have mocked me. Oh, you're like Dr. Doolittle. That's the most annoying thing that I heard. You're like Dr. Doolittle. They don't believe in it. But over time, I've realized it's not my job to make people believe. I believe in it and I will follow my path. If you have to believe in it, great. If not, that's fine. And I understand the skepticism also comes from experience and from the right places. So I have had conversations with people where they have felt that they didn't get the service that they really deserved. They were unhappy with communications, and that's completely fine. I want to respect their opinion. I also feel in a lot of ways we have to be very privileged and entitled to experience this.
Yeah.
Because my roti kapda makan is sorted, I can sit here talking about animals, talking to animals, plants, nature. But if the basics are not taken care of, it's very difficult to sit and discuss spirituality, right? So when people do come with their own skepticism and their own thoughts about this, I don't feel the right way is to argue, because that is only going to push them further away. And this is not something I can convince anyone of. It is something that needs to be experienced. And unless they are privileged and entitled enough to experience it, they are not going to believe it. And that's not my job. My job is not to push them into something.
So I was thinking of how yoga has so many yoga poses are based on animals.
Animals.
There's downward dog. We
Cobra,
have
camel,
yeah,
to cat,
tree pose, tiger, lion, all kinds of
Yes.
poses. So that I feel like yoga is so also deeply rooted in nature around us,
Yes.
and of course you have the mind, body, breath connection. Do you sense some kind of a correlation between animal communication and yoga?
100%, yes, 100%. So I don't necessarily, and you would agree, yoga is not about asanas, right? It's not just what
Getting into a pose.
Yeah, it's not what the Western world would want to believe, that it's not like lifting weights and pilates, and it's a way of life.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual practice. It begins when we wake up in the morning and it continues even after we sleep at night. So it is a way of life where we believe, again, everything around us is energy, everything is interconnected. And that is what is reflected in the asanas also. So when you do a cobra pose, what are you trying to integrate? It's not only about our spine and getting into that pose and feeling a certain way. It's actually being that animal
Yeah.
to feel what that animal feels. So that includes grounding as well, right? Because snakes happen to be the most grounded, since most of their body is touched to the
Touching the-
ground. When we say the even when we do the asan for the tree, I'm not very good
Vrikshasan.
with names. Huh?
I'll
So
tell you
please,
that.
yeah.
Vrikshasan.
So what is that? It's not just how we stand on one leg. It's about feeling that roots going in Mother Nature and grounding and soaring high while being grounded and rooted.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think yoga or yoga is only about the asanas and for our body, but we need to look deeper and deeper. If you see, it all culminates into the same thing, that we are all one, we are all forms of the same energy, and hence we need to feel how it is to be in someone else's body or see the world from someone else's point of view to really understand that aspect. So even with animal communication, for those who may not be able to communicate, you can simply become that animal through a yogic pose or a yogic asana to understand how that animal feels, because that is what that pose actually means. No, that asana
Yeah.
actually means, it's not just the physical movement, it's feeling what we are doing. And it has a great relevance to animal communication. Most yogic practitioners would very easily pick up on animal communication without any obstacles.
So it's been great having you, Akshaya. If
Same
anyone
here.
wants to book a consult with you, if they want to, check with their animal about you, how can they reach out to you?
So I have a website, www.animalcommunication.in. All my details are up there. My social media, my email ID. That's the best place to connect with me.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
thank you for tuning into the YwR podcast. We'll see you again very soon.